Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video on diving into the screenshots from the 8th gameplay stream by the devs over at Age of Wonders 4. This was the first stream after the launch of the game, and it was talking a lot about how the game was received and their plans moving forward, specifically their plans to release the free Wyvern update alongside the Dragon Dawn DLC sometime in the near future. So just like I've done with all the other gameplay streams, I've went through and taken screenshots, and I figured it would be interesting for us to look at all of these together just so we can go through them in detail. I will have timestamps below, so please feel free to use them if you find any particular point less interesting than things that are coming up later in the video. I'll be posting images of um, that we're going to be looking at in this video on the official Age of Wonders 4 form, and I will put a link in the description if you want to just kind of follow alongside. If something's kind of small, you can zoom in on the image using that link. And an important disclaimer, we are looking at screenshots from a relatively early version of the game, an early build of the game, and a lot of these numbers are likely going to change before even Dragon Dawn DLC comes out. I think something about the development means they have to verify things. So a lot of the things that we're looking at probably won't change too much from that version to the version we get with Dragon Dawn, with the Wyvern update. But it's kind of hard to know because they are doing things slightly differently than what they did with Age of Wonders Planetfall. So I think I actually want to zoom in a little bit here just so that we can get a better look at this screenshot. This is a loading screen that we're going to get with the free Wyvern update. At least that's what it sounds like. Towards the end of the stream, Tom clicked the wrong button and decided to reload. And it sounded like for a second that this might have something to do with the Dragon Dawn DLC. I mean, it does have a giant dragon standing behind this person who's engulfed in flames. So it could have been that they made a little mistake and they actually accidentally showed off something a little bit early. But I don't really know. It's hard to say at this point. I think it looks fantastic. I love that we're getting new loading screens. I believe there's only like 2 or 3 in the base game, so getting 1 or 2 extras will just like help the game feel like more fresh and like something that recently came out. I think that would be cool if that we are going to be getting things along like this as the game develops, kind of like with Stellaris. Every once in a while they'll release a big update with a free thing that comes alongside it, and everybody gets access to the cool new loading screens. After that, they showed off a little bit about the faction creation and how you have 2 new traits, one body and one society trait. And at first I thought that meant we were going to get a mind trait, but now that I'm rereading this, it seems like it always said that you're going to get one body trait and one social trait, or one society trait, I believe. And the first one we kind of saw was poisonous. We never actually got to see the modifier and what it does, but I have to assume that when you attack somebody, it applies damage over time. It applies probably like light damage, maybe -4, maybe -6, maybe -4, or -8. And it could be only on range attacks. It could be only on melee attacks. It could be only on magic attacks. We don't really know yet, but that's my estimation based off how these other mechanics work. It probably has similar numbers to what these other things have to offer. And yeah, it didn't appear to be anything new in the mind traits. They did show off the society trait not too long after that. Yeah, it's artifact hoarders, I believe. They also mentioned how souls are easier to get. That's something that was covered in the dev diary in more detail. But there's been basically a lot of changes to the souls economy so that you can get them more easily. And then when you do use souls, it actually uses less souls than it used to. They added the corrupt soul, which was a unit that you would fight in an event. Every once in a while, there would be like this event that would spawn in 2 corrupted souls. I believe they're either tier 2s or tier 3s. I think they are tier 3s, and they would basically make it so that if somebody's got negative morale, either the corrupted soul did more damage to that unit or that unit was less capable of dealing out damage. It's kind of like compounding or spiraling the direction of the fight and in the direction of the corrupted soul side. It is nice to have another undead unit in the mix. I did feel like a lot of the lower tier ones weren't that useful. So getting this higher tier one seems like something that could make this tree just generally a lot better. They did show off the artifact hoarders in stream. Is kind of hard to read, but it's saying basically if you have a tier 2 or 3 hero item that isn't equipped, I believe you get extra mana from it. Actually, let's zoom in a little bit more just so we can read this, and I'll zoom out again. So this says gain a tier 2 or 3 hero item after clearing an ancient wonder or an infestation. So it's a little bit harder to clear out ancient wonders than infestations. You'll probably get most of those hero items from the infestations, but that's pretty easy to come by. It makes it a lot easier to come by these items, and it will make it so that it's not just the AI that has a bunch of items when you go into your first few fights. It says that you gain extra mana with hero items via artifact hoard. Yeah, so I think if you don't have something equipped, you get like 2 mana for each item that's not equipped at the end of your turn. And it does seem like it's gonna push people towards unequipping their heroes at the end of every turn just to get the most mana and then re-equipping them right before they go into fights. I have to imagine that this will change one way and one way or another, but who knows? Maybe it'll be like the Whispering Stones, and that effect will build up over time. Like if an item's only unequipped for one turn, maybe it doesn't generate any mana, but after one turn it generates 1 mana, and after 2 turns it generates 2 mana, up to like maybe 3 mana if you keep it unequipped for a long period of time. Maybe you have to like move it over into your Dragon's Hoard, kind of like equipped it there. I don't know. I could see there being some solutions to this. But it's fun that they're adding new traits. I think that's going to really keep the game feeling fresh and alive and just like, interesting. So you have new toys to go play around with. I did just go back and try and figure out how much the artifact hoarders would give you in terms of mana for an item that's not being equipped, and it seemed like the Ring of Regeneration was giving +3 mana per turn. It might be that any item gives +3 mana per turn, or maybe different tier items will give a different amount of mana based on what tier they are. Like maybe a tier 2 gives you +2 mana, and tier 3 gives you +3 mana, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember off the top of my head what tier Ring of Regeneration is, but I think it's a tier 2. Um, right here, yeah, we can see actually zoomed in, it's saying that it's just +3 for the Wand of Rising Dead, and after that we have a note that they mentioned partway through pretty early on. They were noticing how they mentioned how they were addressing people using summon animal and summon elemental and summon undead to just win fights without really using any of their other units. So now tactical summons have a timer so that they only last 3 turns, except for zombies who lose HP each turn and can't be healed. So eventually they do disappear. But I think in theory that means they should last a little bit longer than 3 turns unless somebody attacks them. Then they're not gonna last quite as long. It's interesting because I'm not sure if that means that these tactical summons are going to be um, once per battle casts. I don't think they actually showed it off in this stream, or if it's going to be something that goes on a cooldown. Because if these guys only last for 3 turns, I could see it coming off of cooldown, because spending a turn to summon in more units means that hero doesn't get to use his actions on something else, which may be more time sensitive. They might need a run to catch up with everybody else or kill some other units. So yeah, it says here that now when you raise the undead, they come back as decaying zombies. Awakeners now get a single awaken ability, and Sun Priests get the twin awakening. I also noticed that the hero no longer had twin awakening when they were awakening people. They were getting a single target awaken. I think that's to try and make Sun Priests a little bit more useful in the support role. I found that my heroes are better at awakening, and I just wouldn't make Sun Priest when I was playing the high culture. So I think this is a really smart and logical change. The Awakeners were just all around amazing, so giving them a slightly like worse support means that they'll be used more often for attacking, which is the whole role of the battle priest. The sun priest should be using more of its turns trying to support the other units. So yeah, that's cool. Mortal champions and maybe all heroes you recruit um, get a free hero skill from their culture. I believe Wizard Kings also get the new hero skill from their culture that they previously had to go spend a point on, a level up point on. Um, but it's not entirely clear. I think they said something about your racial champions or something like that, which indicates to me that maybe the dragon rulers, maybe they work slightly different. Maybe they don't get the hero skill from the culture. They get a different hero skill, and only the champions and the wizard kings get things like Twin Awakening or the new thing that replaces Twin Awakening. I think it's just called Awakening now. And Primal Strike is what you get from Barbarian. Uh, so yeah, it's like it's something that makes it a little bit easier for your heroes to fit into the role of your culture. I found I was almost never getting most of the culture hero skills except for Twin Awakening because well, Twin Awakening is pretty useful and it's nice to have some support skills to help you get towards the ones that require other support skills to unlock. But yeah, the idea here is make your choices matter more. The idea that heroes make your choices matter more and that more changes like this are throughout the patch, I think is a great direction to be moving in. I like that because it's going to make the game more replayable. If none of your choices change how you play the game, then the game just becomes stale a lot quicker. Another one of the big changes that they made was to signature skills. They made it so that you can get your signature skills a little bit earlier. Now you can get them at level 4, level 8, level 12, and level 16. You don't get a fifth one at level 20. I believe you can still get up to level 20. Um, but yeah, they basically moved these forward so that you don't have to try and take advantage of the experience system quite as much, or you don't need to know how to do that in order to get access to these signature skills. You should be able to get things like Summon Animal or Frostfire Detonation a lot quicker now. And they didn't want to make it just easier for people to gain experience. So this is, I think, their compromise for that. I'm not entirely sure if I understand how this helps, because in my mind, this just means that people are going to get to like the really silly broken stuff a lot quicker. But I guess with them changing how the tactical summons, that could be fine. I noticed that some of the other ones aren't quite as game breaking or game changing. So um, I don't know. Maybe it'll work. Maybe I'll really like the way this actually works in practice. But to me, it seems like people who get an advantage will get more of an advantage now a lot faster, and they'll be able to snowball that, given the lower thresholds for these signature skills. You can kind of see it says the numbers up here in the top left. It's 4, 8, 12, and 16 now. There's also these little arrows that you can use to switch between your heroes and your cities. I really love that functionality. I was getting really flustered, you know, trying to navigate the menu the other day. I think trying to get my hero items from one hero to another. So just being able to click a little arrow by their name is going to be awesome. They put little arrows up here on the top right for the heroes, and I think it's actually near the name of the city near the top left when you're in the city menu. So that's great. I think that's going to save a lot of time and clicking, which is not what we're here for. Um, there's going to be new hero origin events, Wizard Kings, and Mortal Champion stuff. I believe the one below is for a Mortal Champion, and it's like saying, oh, we don't want to turn into something evil like the Wizard Kings, changing our people and just using them as pawns on a board, right? But there should be other stuff that we get uh, that have to do with your choices. Essentially, this is kind of going back to that point that they made earlier in the stream and I talked about earlier in this video about trying to make your choices matter more. So I could see this not just having to do with Wizard King and champions, but also things like your culture or maybe your society traits. I think that could really shake things up a lot. Of course, some people might end up taking certain society traits to get access to certain events, but I think that that kind of randomness could make it really interesting in uh, any kind of setting, not just multiplayer, not just single player, but just whatever type of game you're trying to have. After that, we have something about the changes to the information and how it's displayed. Now, this is an aspect of the game that I have very little experience with. I haven't played against an AI in quite some time, and I don't really look at their AI modifiers and behaviors when I do play with them. Typically, I just kind of attack them and take them out as quickly as possible so I can practice a strategy. But this is saying now that basically when you first meet a nation, you can hover, I think, your mouse over the modifier for your relations, and it'll break down exactly why they feel the way they feel towards you. And I believe they changed the way it's written, so it's a little bit more clear. Right now, it's saying basically there's conflicting affinities between astral and materium, and I don't think it quite was that clear in the past. And there may be one or two other things in here that I'm missing just because I'm not terribly familiar with this whole system and what it used to display. Leonard also mentioned that they changed how interactions with rulers in the void works. So I'm guessing now you can maybe actually trade with them, change your diplomatic status, maybe trade gold for mana. That kind of stuff I believe was locked if your leader was defeated, and it makes it very difficult to accomplish certain things if you accidentally lose your leader, like off in a fight somewhere, clearing out a site that you thought would be safe. But also just kind of like it's really limiting to newer players because they don't know they're going to lose access to that. Whereas veteran players, they have that information so they can plan around losing their leader. But I think it also makes it so you can't cast spells and do a lot of other things that would be nice to do. Um, so it may be that that kind of stuff is still the way it used to be, but specifically if you want to make a deal with another leader, if you wanted to trade items, um, I think you should be able to do that with the new update, or at least you should be able to do more stuff like that. They added a new goodbye button so that you don't have to click through quite so many menus. I believe here you used to have to click back to exit out of the diplomatic menu, but now you can just say goodbye. And it closes it down for you. It's funny how like those little things you don't realize how much you like them or how important they are until you don't have them. And yeah, this is one of those things where I remember thinking, why can't I just close out of this menu? When I click a little X, it just closes the whole thing so we can get back to the strategic map. I believe we may be getting a new visual timer. I'm not too sure if this is something that a mod created or if it was already in the base game because I did see some people talking a little bit about it. And I like the idea of having this because it makes it very easy for you to keep track of what's actually happening around you. Age of Wonders is a pretty complicated game with a typically a pretty big map. And when somebody's about to take a new sector, if they're building an outpost, it is super valuable to have that information before it actually happens. You might be able to send a unit over to disrupt that, to cancel it essentially, or you may be able to set up your own outpost so that you can get claims in the space surrounding their outpost, or you can kind of deny them what they may be trying to do with that outpost. I believe they may have added that timer also for things like absorbing a city or like founding a city. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that sounds right. They also mentioned that you can now remove city ruins, which is something I think Potato McWhiskey will be very happy to hear. It's something that, yeah, I never really had to deal with because I don't raise cities too often. Typically, I absorb them or vassalize them. But I think if you're going to be evil, it makes sense to just say, no, this city is off limits. It's out of the game. I think there is a setting which makes it so that you can't found cities. So you only get the one that you start with. Um, or the ones that you conquer. So if you raise the city, then that wouldn't be able to be a new city because it can't get, and nobody can found new cities. But it just kind of like takes that setting and brings it into the base game to make it so that if you want to be evil, it's slightly easier. There's a few other things in here that we can talk about, but I don't think they have screenshots. Yeah, no, we don't have any more screenshots, just a couple things that I noted from this stream. The first one was them talking about design choices that they made in Age of Wonders 4. They decided to try and make Planetfall a little bit more balanced for a multiplayer experience, and they decided with Age of Wonders 4 that they wanted to be more permissive. That was the word they used. They wanted to allow players to get access to some more like silly, broken, fun combinations to make the single player experience more fun. And I think that that's cool. That it's that they're going for something different. That if people want the multiplayer thing, that there's going to be games that are a little bit more focused on that. But if people want that like really silly, fun, broken single player experience, they can do that. I know like what's that channel? Spiffing Brit. He loves those breaking the game. A lot of people like to do that, and it's just kind of fun to kind of experiment and test those silly things. So yeah, I think that for people like me, that's awesome. People, I'm sure in the multiplayer community heard that and were like, "What? Why would you do that?" But I get it. I think it makes a lot of sense from a developer point of view. They also mentioned that the underground to surface travel is a little bit more balanced. So if you're trying to attack somebody on the other side of an underground passage, you don't have to attack 3 stacks with just 1 stack, because essentially you could park all of your forces on one side of a underground passage, make it really hard for somebody to attack into it because they can't take advantage of the reinforcement rule, and you can. So now it's just going to be basically 1 stack of units. That's 6 units against another stack of units, another 6 units if you're going from either the surface to the underground or going from the underground to the surface. I think that just makes a lot of sense, and it's probably something that didn't come up too much when they were playtesting. But like, I've actually come across it a little bit in my multiplayer games. If you want to get to the underground, it can be kind of tricky, and you got to plan your movement a little bit more in advance. And sometimes that means it meant going around to a different underground passage just to get your units underground. Um, they also mentioned that there's going to be changes to Rally of the Lieges coming in the patch after this one. So even though um, they're kind of talking about and promoting the Wyvern patch, they're already actively thinking about what comes after that. And I think that really shows that they want to make this game the best that it can be, and they're putting in the work to make that a reality. I think Rally of the Lieges is something that I'm enjoying, but it definitely feels weak compared to being evil, and I really want to see that mechanic become a little bit more viable, a little bit stronger, and a little bit more useful in general, not just multiplayer, but in single player. I like getting access to the tier 4 units, and I like Heroes giving me access to different types of units I can recruit. I just hope that the new system incorporates elements of that part of Rally of the Lieges, because it does make it pretty dynamic, a little bit more like changing based on what you can get access to. I know some people like to make a short-term plan and a long-term plan, and that's what they're going to do. But I like to play based off of what I have around me. Um, Next, they mentioned a little bit of changes that are coming after the changes to Rally of the Lieges. I think they want to make some changes to naval combat and the underground, just because a lot of people are finding the combat in the water to be less interesting and pretty basic. But there's I think, a design reason for that. They didn't want people fighting on the water. They wanted people living on land. But I don't know, it'd be kind of cool to have some water cities. I would really personally enjoy like a water centric DLC, but that's not on the agenda for the next year. Maybe after um, the 4 DLCs that they've announced, they'll do some more things. I think with the way the game launched, that's more likely than if it had performed less well. It seems like they were leaving it vague for a reason, so I'm really hopeful for what's coming in the not just near future, but the far off future for Age of Wonders 4. Hero items may get a significant update in one of the DLCs and will tie into other systems. So right now, I think a lot of people have noticed that they don't get nearly as many hero items as the AI, and sometimes it can be really tricky to get those items. In other games, you'll have like way more than you'll ever need. But it kind of depends a little bit on your play style too. If you're going to be evil, if you're going to go out and attack people, all of a sudden you're swimming in items. But I think that should get addressed in the Empire of something DLC, the one that I think is coming up after Dragon Dawn, because that one was is all about building civilizations, and I think that would make sense to have kind of like a forge type mechanic where you make your items and you make it plan that way. I don't know. It should be fun though. I could see it coming, getting more items from quests, so we'll see. And the last thing we have here is a note about Forced March. Apparently, Forced March used to be something that you could do from the start of the game, but the UI was confusing to new players, so they suggested moving it back. And I personally would really like it if you could toggle that kind of thing on earlier in the game, so that if you wanted to have that kind of movement in multiplayer, that it's just right there from the beginning. But I think there are ways to get around that. You could do different starting conditions to give you more resources to play around with. Maybe that can help you get like affinity as well. It's one of those things I haven't played around with. I usually just go with something close to the standard settings, but who knows? Yeah, like but with low defender strength and things like that to make it easier multiplayer. That's everything I have for you in this video. I know a lot of my other summary videos have been longer because there were more screenshots of things that were not in the game, things that were coming out in the near future. This video, their stream, was more of a check-in and just like letting us know basically how things had been going and what their plan was. I think a lot of people were confused about why we hadn't seen a big patch like we had seen with Age of Wonders Planetfall. I think Age of Wonders Planetfall got their big patch 2 or 3 weeks after the big release, but things got delayed because of, I believe, the consoles that they're developing for. They want to try and push all of the updates at the same time so that Xbox, PlayStation, and PC gets access to all the same toys um, at this on the same day. I get that, but I kind of wish I had my updates so I could play around with it. Anyways, I'll see you around. Have a good one.